Hotel Bella Vista, a true horror story. There's a rule that long-haul drivers in Mexico know by heart, passed down through generations like a prayer or a curse. If you see a hotel glowing in the fog on Christmas Eve, do not stop. Do not slow down. Do not even look at it for too long. Keep driving until your fuel runs out or the sun comes up, whichever happens first. I wish someone had told me that rule before the night I found Hotel Bella Vista. I wish someone had grabbed my shoulders, looked me in the eyes, and made me understand that some places exist between worlds, waiting for the lost and the desperate, like spiders waiting for flies. But nobody warned me. And by the time I understood the truth, I had already walked through those doors. My name is Valentina Mendoza. I was 26 years old in December of 2019, and I had what my mother called a restless soul. I could not stay in one place for more than a few months before the walls started closing in, before the familiar streets began to feel like prison corridors. So I traveled. I worked odd jobs in different cities, saved enough money to move on, and repeated the cycle. My apartment in Mexico City was just a storage unit where I kept clothes between trips. The road was my real home, and I loved it with the kind of fierce devotion that only comes from running away from something you cannot name. That December, I had been visiting a friend in Veracruz when my mother called with news that made my blood run cold. My grandmother was sick, really sick this time, and the doctors were not optimistic. She might not make it to the new year. I had to come home for Christmas. I had to say goodbye. I left Veracruz on December 23rd, planning to drive through the night and arrive by morning. The highway would have been faster, but I chose the mountain road instead. I told myself it was because the scenery was prettier, because I wanted to clear my head before facing whatever waited at home. The truth was simpler and uglier. I was scared. I was scared of watching my grandmother die, scared of the grief that would follow, scared of becoming the kind of person who stayed in one place because everyone she loved was buried there. So I took the long way, giving myself a few extra hours of freedom before responsibility swallowed me whole. The first few hours were peaceful. The road wound through pine forests and small villages decorated with Christmas lights, their windows glowing warm and golden against the darkening sky. I played old songs on the radio and tried not to think about hospital beds and funeral arrangements. The sun set around 6, painting the mountains in shades of orange and purple, and for a moment I felt almost calm, almost happy. Then the fog rolled in. It came from nowhere, thick and white and absolute, swallowing the road in front of me like a living thing. One moment I could see for miles, the next I could barely see the hood of my own car. I slowed to a crawl, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, and leaned forward as if those extra inches would help me see through the soup surrounding me. The headlights were useless, just 2 yellow smears that illuminated nothing but more fog. The radio crackled and died, leaving me in silence, broken only by the rumble of the engine and my own ragged breathing. I checked my phone. No signal. The screen showed a single bar that flickered and vanished like a heartbeat about to stop. I was somewhere in the mountains between Veracruz and Mexico City on a road I did not know, in fog I could not see through, with no way to call for help if something went wrong. The smart thing would have been to pull over and wait. Find a safe spot on the shoulder, turn on my hazard lights, and sleep until morning. But the shoulder was invisible in the fog, and I kept imagining my car sliding off the road into a ravine, tumbling end over end until it came to rest in a place where no one would find me for days. So I kept driving, slower and slower, following the faint yellow line in the center of the road like a lifeline. The clock on my dashboard showed 9:30, then 10, then 11. The fog did not lift. If anything, it grew thicker, pressing against the windows like something trying to get inside. My eyes burned from staring into the white nothing, and my back ached from hunching over the wheel. I needed to stop. I needed to rest. But there was nowhere to stop, nothing but fog and darkness and the endless, winding road. At 11:45, I saw lights ahead. Not headlights from another car, but steady lights, golden and warm, cutting through the fog like a beacon. A town, I thought. A gas station. Somewhere with people and coffee and a bathroom. I pressed the accelerator and followed those lights like a sailor following a star. The town was called San Martin de las Flores, according to the rusted sign at its entrance. It was tiny, just a handful of streets clustered around a central plaza with a church at one end and a cemetery at the other. Most of the houses were dark, their inhabitants already asleep or gathered with family for the holiday. But one building still had lights on a small restaurant with steamed-up windows and a hand-painted sign that read, Cocina de Maria. I parked in front and went inside, the warmth hitting me like a physical force after hours in the cold fog. The place was nearly empty, just an old man behind the counter and a young couple whispering in the corner. Christmas decorations hung from the ceiling, paper stars, and tinsel garlands that had probably been there for decades. A radio played softly traditional Posada songs that reminded me of my grandmother and made my chest ache. The old man looked up as I approached. He had burn scars covering one side of his face, the skin rough and discolored, pulled tight in places where it had healed badly. His eyes held the kind of weariness that comes from seeing too much. "Excuse me," I said. "Is there a hotel nearby, somewhere I can stay for the night?" He studied me for a long moment, taking in my tired face and trembling hands. "On Christmas Eve, everyone goes home to their families. No hotels open tonight, but I need somewhere to sleep. The fog is too thick. I cannot keep driving." He shook his head slowly, almost sadly. "The nearest place with rooms is Tlaxcopan, 30 kilometers west. But in this fog on these roads, you would be crazy to try. 30 kilometers, in fog so thick I could barely see my own headlights, on mountain roads with no guardrails and 100-foot drops." It might as well have been 30,000. "Is there nowhere else?" I asked, hearing the desperation in my own voice. "A boarding house, a church, anywhere." The old man opened his mouth to answer, but before he could speak, the young woman from the corner table stood up and walked over. She was pretty, maybe 19 or 20, with dark hair pulled back in a braid, and eyes that seemed too old for her face. "There's nowhere," she said, "but you should not stay here either. Go back the way you came. Drive until the fog breaks, then stop. Do not stay in this area tonight." "Why not?" She glanced at the old man, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. The young woman pressed her lips together, then turned back to me. "Just trust me. Some roads are not meant to be traveled on Christmas Eve. Some places are not meant to be found." Before I could ask what she meant, she returned to her table and picked up her purse. The young man with her left money on the table, and they walked out without another word. Through the window, I watched them get into an old pickup truck and drive away, their taillights disappearing into the fog like dying embers. I turned back to the old man. What was she talking about? He busied himself wiping down the counter, avoiding my eyes. Old stories, village superstitions, nothing you need to worry about. Just be careful on the roads tonight. I wanted to press him to demand answers, but the exhaustion was catching up with me. My head throbbed, my vision was blurring, and all I wanted was a bed. Any bed. I thanked him for his time and walked back out into the cold. For a while I just sat in my car, watching the fog swirl past the windshield, trying to decide what to do. Going back meant hours more driving in these conditions, and I was already exhausted. Going forward to Tlaxcopan was suicide. Staying in the car meant a sleepless night in freezing temperatures, cramped and miserable and scared. I was still weighing my options when I saw it, a light in the fog. Not the diffuse glow of a street lamp or the passing flash of headlights. This was steady and golden warm, as a hearth fire cutting through the murk like a knife through butter. It came from somewhere to the west, maybe half a kilometer down a road I'd not noticed before. A side road, narrow and unpaved, leading up into the hills. I should have ignored it. I should have remembered the young woman's warning, the old man's evasiveness, all the stories my grandmother used to tell about travelers who followed strange lights and were never seen again. but I was tired, so tired, and that light promised warmth and rest and safety. I started the engine and turned onto the side road. The fog seemed thinner here, or maybe my eyes had adjusted because I could see further than before. The road wound upward through pine trees, their branches heavy with mist, and I caught glimpses of something large and white at the top of the hill. A building, a house maybe, or a church, something with windows that blazed with welcoming light. As I got closer, I saw what it really was, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a hotel, a beautiful hotel gleaming white in the darkness, built in the colonial Spanish style with arched windows and wrought iron balconies, and a courtyard garden visible through the main gate. The sign above the entrance read, Hotel Bella Vista, established 1952 in letters of gold that seemed to glow with their own inner light. And in front of the gate tied to the iron bars and bobbing gently in the breeze were dozens of colorful balloons surrounding a banner that read Grand Opening. I sat there for a long moment just staring. A grand opening. On Christmas Eve, in the middle of nowhere. It made no sense, but there it was, solid and real and impossibly inviting. Maybe it was a new resort, I thought. Maybe some investor had bought an old building and renovated it, choosing Christmas for a soft launch. Stranger things had happened. I parked in the lot in front of the hotel. It was empty, not a single other car in sight, but that made sense too. Grand opening meant no guests yet. I would probably be one of the first. When I stepped out of the car, I noticed two things. First, the cold had lessened somehow, as if the hotel radiated its own warmth. Second, there was a smell in the air, faint but unmistakable. Something burning, not wood smoke or incense, but something sharper, more acrid, like electrical wires overheating, like plastic melting. I looked around for the source, but saw nothing. Probably someone burning trash in one of the villages below, I told myself. The mountains played tricks with smells, carried them for miles on the wind. Nothing to worry about. I grabbed my purse and walked toward the entrance. The lobby was even more beautiful than the exterior had suggested. Marble floors inlaid with intricate patterns, crystal chandeliers hanging from a painted ceiling, a Christmas tree in the corner at least 15 feet tall, decorated with gold and silver ornaments that caught the light and scattered it like stars. Everything was perfect, pristine, like a photograph from a luxury travel magazine, and everything was silent. No music played, no voices echoed, no footsteps sounded on the marble floors. The only sound was the faint hum of the lights overhead and my own breathing too loud in the stillness. I looked around for staff, for other guests, for any sign of life, but the lobby was empty. "Hello," I called out. "Is anyone here?" My voice bounced off the walls and came back to me, distorted and strange, like an echo in a tomb. I waited. Nothing moved. Nothing answered. I walked to the reception desk, a massive thing of polished mahogany with a brass bell sitting on top. I reached out and pressed it. The sound it made was wrong somehow. Clear and sharp, yes, but also cold, mournful, like a bell tolling for the dead. I shivered despite the warmth, and had the sudden urge to turn around and walk back out to get in my car and drive away and never look back. But before I could move, she appeared. The woman seemed to materialize from nowhere, stepping out from a door behind the desk that I could have sworn was not there a moment before. She was young, 18 or 19 at most, with dark hair pulled back from a face that was beautiful in a cold, distant way. Her eyes were brown, but somehow empty, like windows in an abandoned house. She wore a red uniform, the color of old blood, and when she smiled, the expression did not reach those hollow eyes. "Welcome to Hotel Bella Vista," she said. Her voice was flat, mechanical, like a recording played too many times. "My name is Elena. How may I help you? I need a room. Just for tonight." She nodded slowly, as if processing the request from very far away. "You are fortunate. Tonight is our second night open, and you are our first guest." First guest. Something about the way she said it made my skin crawl, but I was too tired to analyze the feeling. I just wanted a bed. "How much for a room free?" she said. Since you are our first guest, the room is complimentary. A Christmas gift from Hotel Bella Vista. That should have been the final warning. Nothing is free, my grandmother always said, especially when strangers offer it. But the exhaustion had seeped into my bones, and the warmth of the lobby was making my eyelids heavy, and all I could think about was sleep. "Thank you," I said. "That is very generous." Elena turned to get a key from the rack behind her, and as she moved, I saw something that made my stomach clench. On her neck, just below her hairline, there was a mark. Not a birthmark or a tattoo, but a scar. A burn scar, the skin puckered and discolored like wax that had melted and hardened again. She turned back before I could look away, and for a moment our eyes met. Something flickered in those empty depths. Something that might have been sorrow or warning or both. Then it was gone, and she was handing me a brass key with the number 217 engraved on it. "Second floor," she said. "The elevator is to your left, or you may take the stairs. I hope you have a pleasant stay." I took the key, feeling the cold weight of it in my palm. "Thank you." I was halfway to the elevator when she spoke again. "Miss Mendoza." I stopped. I had not told her my name. I turned back slowly, my heart beginning to pound. Elena stood exactly where I had left her, perfectly still, those empty eyes fixed on my face. "Do not open the window," she said, "no matter what you hear outside." Then she turned and walked through the door behind the desk, and I could have sworn just for an instant that she was not walking, but floating, her feet not quite touching the floor. I stood there for a long moment, frozen, the key digging into my palm. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, to get out of this place that felt wrong in ways I could not articulate. But my legs were shaking with exhaustion, and the elevator doors were right there, and surely I was imagining things. Surely the fog and the fatigue were playing tricks on my mind. I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed behind me with a sound like a coffin lid falling shut. And as I pressed the button for the second floor, I could have sworn I heard someone laughing very faintly from somewhere deep in the walls. The elevator rose with a groan of old machinery, the kind of sound that belongs to buildings decades past their prime, not to hotels celebrating their grand opening. I pressed myself against the back wall and watched the floor indicator above the door, a brass semicircle with a needle that swung from 1 to 2 with agonizing slowness. The lights inside the car flickered once, twice, and for a terrible moment I was certain they would go out entirely, leaving me trapped in a metal box in the dark. But they steadied, and the doors slid open with a pneumatic hiss, and I stepped out into the second-floor hallway. The corridor stretched before me like a throat, long and narrow and dimly lit by wall sconces that cast more shadows than illumination. The carpet was deep red, the color of dried blood, and so thick that my footsteps made no sound as I walked. Doors lined both sides, each one identical dark wood with brass numbers that gleamed dully in the low light. The air was warmer here than in the lobby, almost uncomfortably so, and carried that same faint burning smell I had noticed outside, stronger, now more insistent. I counted the room numbers as I passed. 201, 203, 205. Each door was closed, each window at the end of the hall curtained against the night, and yet I could not shake the feeling that I was being watched. That behind every door something stood pressed against the wood, listening to my footsteps, waiting for me to pass. The sensation crawled up my spine like cold fingers, and I quickened my pace without meaning to. Room 217 was at the very end of the corridor, next to a large window that looked out over what I assumed was the rear garden. The curtains were drawn here, too heavy velvet, the same red as the carpet, and they did not move despite the draft I felt against my ankles. I stood before my door for a moment, key in hand, trying to calm the pounding of my heart. This was ridiculous. I was exhausted, that was all. The fog and the late hour and the stress of my grandmother's illness were making me paranoid. There was nothing wrong with this hotel except that it was empty and I was tired. I slid the key into the lock and turned it. The mechanism clicked smooth and well-oiled, and the door swung inward on silent hinges. The room beyond was beautiful. I had to admit that even through my unease, a large bed dominated the space, its white linen so crisp they seemed to glow in the soft lamplight. A writing desk stood against one wall, polished wood with brass fittings, and beside it an antique wardrobe that looked like it belonged in a museum. The bathroom door was ajar, revealing glimpses of white tile and a clawfoot tub. On the nightstand, a vase held roses so red they were almost black, their petals perfect and unblemished, their scent heavy and sweet. But something was wrong with the room. I felt it the moment I stepped inside, a dissonance I could not immediately identify. I stood in the doorway, scanning the space, trying to pinpoint the source of my discomfort. The furniture was elegant. The linens were clean. The flowers were fresh. Everything was exactly as a luxury hotel room should be. Then I saw the mirror. It hung on the wall opposite the bed, a massive thing in an ornate gilt frame, easily 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide. My reflection stared back at me, pale and tired and small against the grandeur of the room. But the reflection was wrong somehow. The lighting in the mirror seemed different, dimmer and more yellow, as if the room it showed was lit by candles rather than electric lamps. And the shadows in the mirror were deeper, darker, pooling in corners that should have been illuminated. I blinked and looked again. The mirror showed only what it should: my own haggard face, the white bed behind me, the red roses on the nightstand. I was imagining things. I had to be. I closed the door behind me and locked it, then crossed to the window and pulled back the curtain just enough to peer outside. The fog had grown thicker, a solid wall of white that pressed against the glass like something alive. I could see nothing beyond it, not the garden, not the trees, not even the ground 2 stories below. We could have been floating in a void for all I could tell, the hotel a ship adrift in an ocean of mist. I let the curtain fall and turned back to the room. My eyes went to the mirror again, drawn against my will, but it showed nothing unusual now, just a tired woman in a beautiful room alone on Christmas Eve, far from everyone she loved. The photographs caught my attention next. There were 3 of them hanging in a row above the writing desk, black and white images in silver frames. The first showed the hotel exterior, the same white facade and wrought iron balconies I'd seen from outside. The second was a group portrait, staff members lined up in front of the main entrance, the women in dark dresses and white aprons, the men in suits that looked at least 40 years out of date. The third photograph showed the lobby with its chandelier and marble floors and Christmas tree. But the decorations were different, older, the style unmistakably from another era. I leaned closer, studying the images. The clothing, the hairstyles, the quality of the photographs themselves, everything pointed to the 1970s or early 1980s. But Elena had said the hotel just opened. This was their second night. How could there be vintage photographs of a brand new establishment? Maybe they were reproductions, I told myself. Nostalgic decorations meant to evoke a sense of history. Hotels did that, sometimes created fictional pasts to give themselves character. It meant nothing. It explained nothing. But my hands were shaking as I turned away from the photographs, and the burning smell seemed stronger now, sharp enough to catch in the back of my throat. I went into the bathroom to wash my face, hoping the cold water would clear my head. The fixtures were old-fashioned but functional brass taps, shaped like swan necks, a porcelain sink with hairline cracks in the glaze. When I turned on the water, it came out rust-colored at first, then cleared to a faint yellow that smelled of iron and something else, something organic that I did not want to identify. I splashed it on my face anyway, gasping at the cold, and when I looked up into the mirror above the sink, I saw movement behind me. I spun around. The bathroom was empty. The door was still ajar, showing a sliver of the bedroom beyond, and nothing moved in that slice of visible space. But I could have sworn I saw someone standing in the doorway just for an instant, a figure in red watching me with eyes that did not blink. Elena, I thought. But why would Elena be in my room? And how had she gotten in without my hearing? I stepped back into the bedroom, my heart hammering against my ribs. The room was exactly as I had left it. The bed, the desk, the wardrobe, the mirror, the roses. No one hiding in the corners, no one standing by the door. I checked the lock, still engaged, the chain still in place. No one could have entered without breaking down the door. I was losing my mind. That was the only explanation. The stress and the exhaustion and the strangeness of this night were combining to create hallucinations, tricks of light and shadow that my tired brain interpreted as threats. I needed to sleep. Everything would make sense in the morning. I changed into the oversized t-shirt I used as pajamas, trying to ignore the feeling of being watched that prickled along my skin. The bed was soft when I climbed in the sheets, cool and smooth, and I pulled the blankets up to my chin like a child hiding from monsters. The lamp on the nightstand cast a warm circle of light that pushed back the shadows, and I left it on, unwilling to face complete darkness in this room that felt so wrong. For a while I just lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence. It was too quiet, I realized. No sounds from other rooms, no footsteps in the hallway, no distant murmur of television or conversation. Hotels were never this silent, even late at night. There should have been something, some evidence of life beyond my door. But there was only the quiet, thick and heavy, pressing down on me like a physical weight. I do not know when I first heard the crying. It started so softly that I thought I was imagining it, a faint sound at the very edge of perception. A woman's voice, I thought, high and thin and full of pain. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, from the walls themselves, from the floor beneath the bed, from the air around my head. I held my breath and listened, straining to pinpoint the source, but the sound remained diffuse, directionless, like trying to locate a single drop of water in a rainstorm. The crying grew louder. Words emerged from the sobs, Spanish words, fragmented and desperate. "Help me, please. It burns. Oh God, it burns." I sat up in bed, my blood running cold. The voice was coming from outside, I realized now. From beyond the window with its heavy velvet curtains. Someone was out there in the fog, crying for help, and I was the only one who could hear. "Do not open the window," Elena had said, "no matter what you hear outside." But someone was in pain. Someone was suffering. How could I ignore that? I pushed back the covers and swung my legs over the side of the bed, my bare feet sinking into the thick carpet. The crying continued louder, now more urgent. "Please, someone, please. I am burning alive." I stood and took a step toward the window, then another. The curtains hung motionless before me, and yet I could have sworn I saw them bulge inward slightly, as if something on the other side was pressing against them, trying to get in. My hand reached for the curtain. My fingers brushed the velvet, soft and warm, almost alive beneath my touch. And then the crying stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound had been, a void so complete it seemed to swallow even the beating of my heart. I stood frozen with my hand on the curtain, unable to move forward, unable to step back. The burning smell was stronger than ever, thick enough to taste, and I realized with horror that it was coming from behind the curtain, from whatever waited on the other side of that window. I snatched my hand back as if the fabric had burned me, and retreated to the bed, pulling the covers up around me like armor. My whole body was shaking, and my breath came in short, sharp gasps that I could not control. I stared at the window, waiting for the curtains to move, waiting for something to come through, but nothing happened. The silence stretched on unbroken, and gradually my heartbeat slowed from its frantic pace. A dream. It must have been a dream. I had fallen asleep without realizing it, and my exhausted mind had conjured voices from the darkness. That was all. That was the only explanation that made sense. I lay back against the pillows, keeping my eyes fixed on the window. The lamp still burned on the nightstand, its warm light a fragile shield against the dark. I would not sleep again tonight, I decided. I would wait until morning, until the sun rose and burned away the fog, and then I would leave this place and never look back. But exhaustion is a tide that cannot be held back forever, and despite my fear, despite my certainty that something was terribly wrong, my eyes began to grow heavy. The room blurred around the edges, the lamp's glow softening into a haze of gold, and I felt myself sinking into the mattress as if it were quicksand, warm and soft and inescapable. I do not know how long I slept. Minutes, maybe. Hours. Time had lost all meaning in that room, in that hotel, in that endless fog-bound night. But when I woke, I knew instantly that something had changed. The lamp was out. I had not turned it off. I was certain of that. I had left it burning specifically because I was afraid of the dark, afraid of what might come creeping through the shadows while I slept. But now the room was pitch black, so dark I could not see my own hand in front of my face. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, fumbling in the darkness, and when my fingers finally closed around it, the screen lit up with a glow that seemed blinding after so much black. The time read 3:00 a.m. 3 in the morning. The devil's hour, my grandmother used to call it. The hour when the barrier between worlds grows thin, when spirits walk and demons hunt, and anyone foolish enough to be awake becomes prey. I was still processing this when I heard the knocking. 3 slow, deliberate impacts against my door, the sound of knuckles on wood, measured and patient. Knock, knock, knock. I stopped breathing. The phone's light trembled in my shaking hand, casting wild shadows across the walls. Who would be knocking at this hour? Elena, checking on her only guest. Another traveler lost in the fog like me. Hello, I called, and my voice came out as a croak. Who is there? Silence. Then the knocking came again 3 times, exactly the same rhythm, exactly the same force. Knock, knock, knock. I forced myself to stand, to cross the room to the door. The phone's flashlight beam wavered ahead of me, illuminating familiar furniture made sinister by shadow. I reached the door and pressed my eye to the peephole, holding my breath. The hallway was empty. I could see it clearly through the tiny lens, the red carpet, the wall sconces, the other doors stretching away into darkness. No one stood outside my room. No one waited in the corridor. The knocking had come from nowhere, from nothing, from the door itself. I stepped back, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. This was not possible. Sounds did not come from empty air. Knocking required knuckles, required hands, required a body to produce them. Fire set a voice, and I screamed. It came from right beside me, not from the hallway, but from inside the room, so close I could have reached out and touched the speaker if there had been anyone there to touch. A woman's voice, old and ragged, full of smoke and sorrow. Fire! Run! Run now! I spun around, sweeping the phone's light across the room. The bed, the desk, the wardrobe, the mirror, everything in its place, everything still and silent and empty. But the voice had been real. I had heard it clearly, felt the breath of it against my ear. Run, the voice said again, and this time it seemed to come from the walls themselves, from the floor, from the ceiling, from everywhere at once. Run before it is too late. I backed away until I hit the door, my free hand scrabbling for the lock. I had to get out. I had to leave this room, this hotel, this nightmare that had swallowed me whole. I would take my chances with the fog, with the mountain roads, with anything, rather than spend another moment in this place. But before I could turn the lock, I saw something that froze me where I stood. The mirror was glowing, not reflecting, not catching light from some external source, but glowing from within, a dull orange radiance that pulsed like a heartbeat. I lowered my phone and stared, unable to look away as the glow intensified and shapes began to form in the glass. The room I saw in the mirror was not the room I stood in. It was the same space, the same dimensions, the same furniture in the same positions, but everything was burning. Flames crawled up the walls and licked across the ceiling and spread across the floor like a living carpet of destruction. The heat seemed to radiate from the glass itself, warming my face, drying my eyes, making it hard to breathe. And in the center of the burning room, lying on the burning bed, was a woman. She was young, maybe 18, with dark hair spread across a pillow that was already smoldering at the edges. She wore a red uniform, the kind a hotel employee might wear, and her eyes were open, staring directly at me through the glass. Her mouth moved, forming words I could not hear, and she raised one hand toward me, reaching, pleading, begging for help I could not give. I watched as the flames reached her. I watched as her hair caught fire, as her uniform began to blacken, as her reaching hand curled into a claw of agony. I watched as she burned, as she screamed silently behind the glass, as she died in a room that was both my room and not my room, in a fire that had happened and was happening and would always be happening forever and ever, world without end. I screamed too, or tried to. No sound came out. My throat had closed, my lungs had emptied, my body had forgotten how to function in the face of what I was witnessing. I could only stand there paralyzed as the woman in the mirror burned and burned and burned. Then the image flickered and she was standing. Not lying on the bed anymore, but standing right in front of the glass, inches away from me, her burned face pressed against the surface from the other side. Her skin was black and red and weeping, her hair gone, her eyes two white orbs in a mask of char. Her mouth opened, and this time I heard her voice not beside me but inside me, echoing through my skull like a scream in a canyon. "You should not have come here." I threw myself backward away from the mirror, and my shoulder hit the door hard enough to send pain lancing down my arm. The impact broke whatever spell had held me frozen, and suddenly I could move again, could breathe again, could think again. I spun around, fumbled with the lock, yanked the door open. The hallway was dark. The wall sconces that had been lit when I arrived were all extinguished, leaving only the faint glow from my phone to push back the black. I did not care. I ran not toward the elevator, but toward the stairs at the far end of the corridor, my bare feet silent on the thick carpet, my breath ragged in my ears. Behind me I heard a sound, a door opening, footsteps slow and measured beginning to follow. I did not look back. The stairwell door was heavy metal, and it groaned when I pushed it open. The stairs beyond were concrete industrial, nothing like the elegant appointments of the rest of the hotel. Emergency lighting cast a dim red glow over everything, turning the space into something from a nightmare, all shadows and blood-colored light. I ran down, taking the steps two at a time, my hands sliding along the metal railing. One flight, two, I hit the ground floor landing and shoved through another heavy door into what should have been the lobby. It was the lobby, and it was not. The marble floors were there, and the painted ceiling and the crystal chandelier, but everything was different, older. The Christmas tree was smaller, decorated with tinsel and colored lights instead of the elegant gold and silver I remembered. The furniture was different, heavier, more dated. And the photographs on the walls there were more of them now, dozens of them, all showing the same thing. People, guests, families with children, couples holding hands, elderly pairs smiling at the camera. All of them posed in front of the hotel, in the lobby, in the garden, all of them captured in black and white, all of them from another era, all of them dead. I knew it with a certainty that went beyond logic, beyond reason. These were not photographs of former guests enjoying their stay. These were memorials, tributes, a gallery of the lost. I turned in a slow circle, taking in the transformed lobby, the impossible photographs, the wrongness that saturated every surface and shadow. This was not the hotel I had entered. This was something else, something that wore the hotel's face like a mask, something that had been waiting for me all along. The elevator dinged. I spun toward the sound. The brass doors were opening, spilling light into the dim lobby, and in that light I saw a figure, tall, still, dressed in red. Elena stepped out of the elevator. She was smiling, that same cold smile that did not reach her eyes, and she moved toward me with a grace that was not quite human, her feet seeming to glide rather than step. The burn scar on her neck was darker now, more prominent, and as she drew closer I saw that it had spread, creeping up toward her jaw, down toward her collarbone, a map of old pain written on her flesh. "Miss Mendoza," she said, and her voice was different, too deeper, rougher, like smoke given sound. "You should not have left your room." "What is this place?" I whispered. "What is happening?" She stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could see the emptiness in her eyes, the void where a soul should have been. "This is Hotel Bella Vista," she said. "It has always been Hotel Bella Vista, and you are our guest." I shook my head, backing away. I want to leave. Let me leave. But you only just arrived. Elena's smile widened, and I saw that her teeth were wrong, too white, too sharp, like a predator's teeth in a young woman's face. And it is Christmas Eve. No one leaves on Christmas Eve. She took another step toward me, and I took another step back, and my heel caught on something, a crack in the marble, a wrinkle in reality. And I fell. The floor rushed up to meet me. I threw out my hands to catch myself, and when my palms hit the marble, it was hot. Not warm, but hot like stone that had been baking in the sun for hours, like the surface of a stove just before it begins to glow. I cried out and tried to push myself up, but my arms would not obey. My legs would not respond. My body had become a prison of frozen flesh and screaming nerves. Elena stood over me, looking down with those empty eyes. "Sleep now," she said, "and when you wake, everything will make sense." Her hand reached toward my face. I saw the burn scars on her palm, the melted skin, the exposed tissue beneath. And then her fingers touched my forehead, cold as death, despite the heat radiating from everywhere else, and the world went away. I woke in bed. For a long moment I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember where I was and how I had gotten there. The room was bright morning light filtering through the curtains, and everything looked normal. The bed, the desk, the wardrobe, the mirror on the wall reflecting nothing but the ordinary space around it. The vase of roses on the nightstand, their petals still perfect, their scent still sweet. A dream. It had all been a dream. The burning mirror, the transformed lobby, Elena with her sharp teeth and empty eyes, none of it was real. I had fallen asleep, and my exhausted mind had conjured nightmares from the strangeness of this place. That was all. That was everything. I reached for my phone to check the time and saw the burns on my palms. They were real, red and raw and weeping, the skin blistered where I had touched the hot marble floor. I stared at them, unable to process what I was seeing, unable to reconcile the evidence of my own flesh with the explanation I so desperately wanted to believe. The clock on my phone read 5:47 a.m. Outside, beyond the curtains, I could hear birds beginning to sing. Almost dawn, almost morning. Almost safe. I had to get out of here. I had to leave before whatever had happened in the night could happen again. I threw back the covers and swung my legs out of bed, ignoring the pain in my hands, ignoring the questions screaming in my mind. None of it mattered. Only escape mattered. I grabbed my purse, shoved my feet into my shoes, and crossed to the door. My hand closed around the handle. I took a breath. I turned the lock, and in the mirror behind me I saw flames begin to rise. I did not look back. I did not let myself think about what I had seen. I just pulled open the door and stepped into the hallway, ready to run, ready to fight, ready to do whatever it took to get out of this place. The corridor was quiet, normal. The wall sconces were lit, casting warm light on the red carpet. The doors were closed. The air was still, and nothing moved in either direction. For a moment I stood there waiting for something to happen, for Elena to appear, for the floor to catch fire, for the walls to start bleeding. But nothing did. The hotel was just a hotel, silent and empty and waiting. I started walking toward the stairs. Fast at first, then faster, until I was running my footsteps soundless on the thick carpet, my burned palms throbbing with every swing of my arms. The stairwell door loomed ahead of me, and I hit it at full speed, bursting through into the concrete space beyond, down the stairs, through the lobby, out the front door. The fog was still there, thick and white and absolute, but I did not care. I ran to my car, fumbled with the keys, threw myself into the driver's seat. The engine started on the first try, and I slammed my foot on the gas, sending the car lurching forward, away from the hotel, away from the nightmare, away from everything. I did not look in the rearview mirror. I knew that if I did, I would see something I could not survive seeing. So I kept my eyes forward, watching the fog swirl around the car, following the narrow road down the hill, and I did not look back. But even without looking, I could feel it. The weight of attention, the pressure of eyes, the certainty that something was watching me go. And beneath that feeling, beneath the terror and the relief and the desperate need to escape, a single thought kept circling through my mind. If the marble floor was hot enough to burn my hands, if the mirror showed flames that were not there, if the hotel somehow exists between what is real and what is not, then what happens when the sun comes up? What happens when the fog clears and the night ends and the world goes back to normal? What happens to the hotel? What happens to the people still inside? I drove faster and I did not look back, and I tried very hard not to think about the woman in the mirror burning forever in a room that was both there and not there, in a fire that never ended, in a hell that wore the face of a luxury hotel. The fog began to thin as I reached the bottom of the hill, and ahead of me, through gaps in the white, I could see the first pale light of dawn breaking over the mountains. I had survived the night, but something told me the night was not finished with me yet. The road stretched before me, gray asphalt cutting through white fog, and I pressed the accelerator harder, watching the speedometer climb. 50 kilometers per hour, 60, 70. The car shuddered on the uneven surface, and I gripped the wheel with my burned palms, ignoring the pain that shot up my arms with every bump and curve. Behind me, the hotel was disappearing into the mist, and ahead of me, the first light of dawn was breaking over the mountains, and I was going to make it. I was going to survive. I was going to escape this nightmare and never look back. The fog began to thin. I could see further now, could make out the shapes of trees on either side of the road, could see the sky lightening from black to gray to pale gold. The sun was rising, the night was ending. Whatever power the hotel held over this place was weakening with the coming day. I laughed. The sound was hysterical, broken nothing like my normal voice, but I did not care. I had done it. I had survived. I had walked into a place that existed between worlds and walked out again, scarred but alive, damaged but whole. I was going to be okay. And then I saw the sign. It stood at the side of the road, weathered wood with faded paint, the kind of sign that small towns put up to welcome visitors. I slowed as I approached it, squinting through the windshield to read the words. San Martin de las Flores. Population 847. Welcome. I stopped the car. I'd been driving for at least 20 minutes, maybe 30. I'd come down from the hill where the hotel sat, had followed the winding road through the fog, had put kilometers between myself and that terrible place. I should have been far away by now, should have been approaching the main highway, should have been halfway to the next town. Instead, I was back where I started. The same sign I had passed hours ago when I first turned off to find a place to sleep. The same small town with its dark houses and empty streets. The same restaurant with its steamed windows and hand-painted sign, Cocina de Maria, though the lights were off now and the door was closed. I had driven in a circle. Or the road had bent back on itself. Or something far worse had happened, something that defied logic and physics and everything I thought I knew about how the world worked. I sat there in the idling car, staring at the sign, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was not possible. Roads did not loop like this. Distance did not fold in on itself. I had been driving away from the hotel, I was certain of it, and yet here I was, back at the beginning, as if the past half hour had never happened. A tap on my window. I screamed and spun around, my heart lurching into my throat, my hands coming up to defend against whatever was attacking me. But there was no attacker. There was only the old man from the restaurant, the one with the burn scars on his face, standing beside my car in the gray morning light, his expression grave. I rolled down the window with shaking hands. "How did you find me?" He did not answer the question. Instead, he looked at me with eyes that held too much knowledge, too much sorrow. "You went to the hotel," he said. It was not a question. I tried to leave. I drove away. But I ended up back here. The old man nodded slowly, as if this was exactly what he expected. The hotel does not let go easily. Once you enter, you become part of its story. The only way out is through. "What does that mean, through what?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. The fire. You must survive the fire. When it burns, when the truth is revealed, then you will have a chance to escape. But you must face it. You cannot run. I do not understand. He straightened, stepping back from the car. Go back. Face what waits for you. It is the only way. I stared at him, wanting to argue, wanting to demand a better explanation, wanting to do anything other than what he was suggesting. Go back to that place of mirrors and flames and empty-eyed women in red. The idea was insane, but as I sat there, I realized something. The fog was thickening again. The pale dawn light was fading, the sky darkening from gold to gray to black. And through the rearview mirror, I could see a glow on the hilltop where no glow should be. The hotel, waiting. Why, I asked, my voice barely audible. Why is this happening to me? The old man's face softened, and for a moment he looked almost kind. Because you stopped, because you entered, because on Christmas Eve the hotel remembers, and anyone who walks through its doors becomes part of the memory. He stepped back further, melting into the fog that was now rolling down the street like a living thing. Face the fire, he called, his voice growing distant. Survive the truth. It is the only way. Then he was gone, and I was alone, and the night was falling again, even though it should have been morning, and on the hilltop the hotel was glowing like a beacon calling me back. I sat in the car for a long time, watching the light, feeling the pull of it like a hook in my chest. I could keep driving, I thought. I could circle these roads forever, trapped in a loop of my own fear, never escaping, never moving forward. Or I could do what the old man said. I could go back. I could face whatever waited for me in that place of fire and memory. I thought about my grandmother lying in a hospital bed hundreds of kilometers away, waiting for me to come say goodbye. I thought about my mother, who had always worried about my wandering ways, who had always feared I would get lost somewhere and never find my way home. I thought about all the roads I had traveled, all the places I had seen, all the experiences that had made me who I was. And I thought about the woman in the mirror burning forever in a room that was both there and not there. I thought about her eyes, white and pleading, and her voice inside my head. You should not have come here. She was right. I should not have. But I had, and now I had to deal with the consequences. I turned the car around and drove back up the hill. The hotel looked exactly as it had when I first arrived. White walls gleaming in the darkness, windows blazing with golden light balloons bobbing gently in front of the entrance. Grand opening, the banner read as if nothing had changed, as if I had never left, as if the hours of terror I had experienced were nothing but a dream. I parked in the empty lot and stepped out of the car. The burning smell was stronger now, thick enough to coat my tongue, and the air felt wrong, heavy, and charged like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. I walked toward the entrance on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else, my body moving of its own accord, my mind floating somewhere above and behind. The lobby was waiting for me. It was the same as before, marble floors and crystal chandeliers and the massive Christmas tree in the corner. But it was also different. The photographs on the walls seemed to have multiplied, hundreds of them now, covering every available surface. All those black and white faces staring at me with eyes that knew too much. And at the reception desk, standing perfectly still, was Elena. She smiled when she saw me, that same cold smile that did not reach her empty eyes. "Miss Mendoza, we have been expecting you." "I know what this place is," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "I know what happened here." "Do you?" Elena tilted her head, a gesture that was almost human, but not quite. "And what is it that you think you know? There was a fire. People died. And now every Christmas Eve it happens again." Elena's smile widened. "You are close, but you do not know everything. Not yet. Then tell me." I stepped closer, driven by a courage I did not know I possessed. "Tell me the truth." "The truth," Elena repeated, and something flickered in her empty eyes, something that might have been pain. "The truth is that I was 18 years old when I died. The truth is that I had only worked here for 1 month. The truth is that I was going to quit after the holidays and go to university in the city. I had plans, dreams, a future. She moved out from behind the desk, gliding toward me with that eerie grace. The truth is that on Christmas Eve someone locked the doors. Someone started a fire in the basement. And 47 people, guests and staff, burned to death because there was no way out. I felt sick. Who would do something like that? The owner. Elena's voice was flat, emotionless, reciting facts she had repeated countless times before. Don Ricardo Esperanza, he was in debt. He had insurance. He thought he would collect the money and start over somewhere else. But he died too. Yes, the fire spread faster than he expected. He was trapped like the rest of us. And now she spread her arms, encompassing the hotel, the lobby, the whole impossible place. We were all trapped together, forever, reliving that night, burning, again and again and again. The clock on the wall behind the reception desk began to chime. I counted the tones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 o'clock. Dawn. The hour when the fire had reached its peak, when the last survivors had succumbed, when 47 souls had been burned away and bound to this place forever. Elena looked at me, and her eyes were no longer empty. They were filled with fear. It is beginning. The first scream came from somewhere above us, a high, thin wail of terror that cut through the silence like a knife. Then another, and another. Dozens of voices crying out in unison, a chorus of the damned, and beneath them the growing roar of something vast and hungry. Fire. I smelled it before I saw it, the acrid stench of smoke and burning flesh filling the lobby, making my eyes water and my lungs seize. Then I saw the glow at the top of the grand staircase, orange and red and terrible, and I understood that everything the old man had told me was true. I had to face the fire. I had to survive the truth. "Run," Elena said, and her voice was no longer flat, but urgent, desperate. "Run now while you still can." But I did not run. Not yet. "Where do I go?" She pointed toward a door at the far end of the lobby, half hidden behind a potted plant. "Service stairs. They lead to the back exit. It is the only door that might open. Why are you helping me?" Elena looked at me, and for a moment she was not a ghost, but a girl 18 years old with dreams and plans and a future that had been stolen from her. "Because I do not want anyone else to burn. Because even the dead can feel pity. Because," she hesitated, and her form flickered like a candle in the wind, "because maybe if you escape, you can tell our story. Maybe then we can finally rest." The fire was spreading. I could see it now, flames licking down the grand staircase, consuming the carpet, igniting the curtains, racing toward us with terrible speed. The heat was building the air, growing thick and hard to breathe, and all around me the screams were getting louder. "Go!" Elena said again. "Go now!" I ran. The service door was heavier than it looked, metal beneath a veneer of wood, and it took all my strength to wrench it open. Beyond was a narrow stairwell, concrete and industrial, lit by emergency lights that cast everything in a bloody red glow. I plunged into it, taking the stairs 2 at a time, heading down toward whatever waited below. Behind me the door slammed shut, and I heard the fire hit it with a sound like a living thing throwing itself against a barrier. The metal groaned, but held, for now. The stairs seemed to go on forever, down and down and down, far deeper than a 2-story building should allow. The air grew hotter as I descended, and the smoke grew thicker, and I had to press my sleeve against my mouth to filter out the worst of it. My burned palm screamed with every contact against the railing, but I did not let go. I could not afford to fall. Not now. Not when I was so close. Finally, after what felt like hours but could only have been minutes, the stairs ended in another metal door. I hit it at full speed, expecting resistance, but it swung open easily, and I stumbled through into chaos. I was in the lobby again, but not the lobby I had just left. This was the lobby as it must have looked on that Christmas Eve in 1987, full of people and noise and desperate activity. Guests ran in every direction, their clothes smoking their faces, twisted with terror. Staff members tried to maintain order, shouting instructions that no one could hear over the roar of the flames. A man in a suit was pounding on the front doors, which would not open, no matter how hard he tried. A woman clutched a baby to her chest, screaming for help that would not come. And everywhere there was fire. It crawled up the walls and dripped from the ceiling and spread across the floor like a living carpet of destruction. It consumed everything. It touched people and furniture and hope alike, and the heat was so intense that I felt my eyebrows begin to singe and my skin begin to tighten. I was in the memory now. I was experiencing the fire as it had actually happened 32 years ago, watching 47 people die in real time. A man stumbled past me, his back engulfed in flames, and I reached out instinctively to help him. But my hands passed through his body like he was made of smoke, and he kept running, screaming until he collapsed near the reception desk and stopped moving. I forced myself to look away. These were ghosts' memories, echoes of a tragedy that had already happened. I could not save them. I could only save myself. The front doors were blocked by fire and by the press of bodies trying to escape. The grand staircase was completely engulfed, a tower of flame reaching up toward the floors above. The service door I had come through had vanished, replaced by a solid wall of burning plaster. But there across the lobby I saw another exit, a side door leading to what looked like a garden or courtyard, partially blocked by fallen debris but not yet fully consumed by the flames. I ran for it. The heat was unbearable. With each step I felt like I was walking into an oven, the air so hot it seared my lungs with every breath. The smoke was blinding, and I navigated more by instinct than by sight, dodging around burning furniture and falling beams and the ghostly forms of the dying. A woman grabbed my arm as I passed, her fingers ice cold despite the inferno surrounding us. Her face was young and terrified, and I recognized her from the photographs on the wall, one of the guests. One of the 47. "Help me," she begged. "Please, I cannot find my children. I cannot help you." The words tore at my heart even as I spoke them. "I am sorry. You are already gone." Her grip tightened, and her eyes filled with a sorrow so deep it seemed to swallow the whole world. Then her form flickered and faded, and she was gone, and I was alone again in the burning lobby. The side door was closer now, maybe 10 meters away. I could see the courtyard beyond it, dark and cool and free of flames. If I could just reach it, if I could just get through, I might have a chance. A beam fell from the ceiling, crashing down in front of me, showering sparks and embers in every direction. I threw up my arms to protect my face and felt the fire kiss my skin, leaving trails of pain along my forearms. But I did not stop. I could not stop. To stop was to die. I leaped over the fallen beam, feeling my hair singe and my clothes begin to smoke. The door was right there, right in front of me, and I reached out to push it open. It did not budge. Locked. Of course it was locked. Every door in this building was locked, sealed by the man who had started the fire, ensuring that no one would escape, ensuring that his victims would burn along with his debts and his crimes. I pounded on the door with my burned fists, screaming in frustration and despair. After everything I had endured, after everything I had faced, I was going to die here, trapped in a memory of fire, another victim of a tragedy that had happened before I was even born. Then I heard her voice. "Miss Mendoza." I turned. Elena stood in the middle of the burning lobby, flames swirling around her but not touching her. Her form had changed. This was no longer the beautiful young woman with empty eyes who had greeted me at the reception desk. This was Elena as she had died, her face blackened and blistered, her uniform charred, and falling away in strips, one arm missing, entirely torn away by the collapse of a burning ceiling. She was horrifying. She was tragic. She was the most human thing I had seen since entering this place. "The door will not open," she said, her voice somehow clear despite the roar of the flames. "They locked all the doors. They wanted us to burn. Then how do I get out?" Elena raised her remaining hand and pointed, not at another door, not at a window, but at me, at my chest, at my heart. You have to choose, she said. You have to decide what matters more, your life or the truth. I do not understand. She moved closer, gliding through the flames like they were water. We have been trapped here for 32 years. Every Christmas Eve we burn, every Christmas Eve we die, and every Christmas Eve we wake up and do it all again. Why? Why can you not move on? Because no one knows. Elena's voice cracked, and I saw tears streaming down her burned cheeks, evaporating in the heat before they could fall. No one knows what really happened here. The official story is that it was an accident, an electrical fault. A tragedy, but no one's fault. But it was not an accident, it was murder. And until someone knows the truth, until someone tells our story, we cannot rest. The fire was growing hotter, the smoke thicker. I could barely see Elena anymore through the haze, but I could feel her presence cold and desperate and pleading. "What do you want me to do? Survive," she said. "Get out of here. And then tell everyone what happened. Tell them about Don Ricardo. Tell them about the locked doors. Tell them about us. But the doors are locked. How can I get out?" Elena smiled, and even through the ruin of her face, it was a beautiful smile full of hope and sorrow and something that might have been peace. "The fire will open the way. When the ceiling falls, there will be a gap, a moment when the structure weakens enough to break through." She pointed toward the side door I had been trying to open. "When I tell you run, do not stop. Do not look back. Just run." The building groaned around us, the sounds of overstressed wood and melting metal combining into a symphony of destruction. Above us, the ceiling was beginning to sag, the support beams giving way under the assault of the flames. Elena turned to face the inferno, her ruined body silhouetted against the orange and red. "It is almost time," she said. "Be ready. Wait." I reached out, not knowing what I intended to do, wanting only to make some connection to acknowledge what she was sacrificing for me. "Thank you for helping me, for giving me this chance." She looked back at me over her shoulder, and her eyes were no longer empty. They were filled with light, with warmth, with a humanity that had survived even death and fire, and 32 years of endless torment. "Do not thank me yet," she said. "Thank me when you are free. Thank me when you tell the world what happened here." The ceiling cracked. Now Elena screamed, "Run!" I turned and threw myself at the door just as the ceiling collapsed. A ton of burning debris came crashing down, smashing through the floor, tearing open walls, creating chaos and destruction everywhere. But in that chaos there was also opportunity. The door frame buckled under the impact, the lock mechanism sheared away, and the door swung open. I did not hesitate. I did not look back. I dove through the opening and into the courtyard beyond, rolling on the cold grass, feeling the blessed relief of fresh air filling my lungs. Behind me, the hotel was collapsing in on itself, floors pancaking down, walls folding in with the entire structure, imploding like a dying star. The fire roared in triumph, consuming everything, leaving nothing but ash and memory. I crawled away from the wreckage, putting as much distance as I could between myself and the inferno. My clothes were smoking, my skin was burned, my hair was singed and falling out in patches. I was in more pain than I'd ever experienced in my life, but I was alive. I lay on the grass and watched the hotel burn, watched 32 years of trapped souls finally find their release, watched the flames reach toward the sky like hands grasping for heaven. And in the heart of the fire, just for a moment, I thought I saw figures rising, dozens of them, men and women and children ascending on columns of smoke and light, finally free, finally at peace. Elena was among them. I saw her clearly, young and whole and beautiful again, her uniform pristine, her smile radiant. She looked down at me from the flames, and she raised her hand in a gesture that might have been farewell or blessing or both. Then she was gone, and they were all gone, and the fire began to die, and the sun began to rise, and the night was finally over. I do not know how long I lay there on the grass, watching the embers cool and the smoke disperse. Minutes maybe, hours. Time had lost all meaning in the aftermath of what I had experienced. But eventually I heard a sound, a car engine growing louder coming up the hill toward the hotel. Then doors opening, voices calling out, footsteps approaching. I turned my head and saw two figures walking toward me through the morning mist. The old man from the restaurant and the young woman who had warned me not to stay in the area. They moved carefully, picking their way through the debris, their faces grave. The old man knelt beside me and looked into my eyes. "You survived," he said, and there was wonder in his voice and respect. "In all these years, you are the first one to survive." I tried to speak, but my throat was too raw from the smoke. The young woman handed me a bottle of water, and I drank greedily, feeling the cool liquid soothe my burned tissues. How I finally managed to croak. "How do you know about the hotel?" The old man's face darkened with memory. I was there that night. Not as a guest, but as a volunteer firefighter from the next town over. By the time we arrived, it was already too late. The building was fully engulfed. We could hear people screaming inside, but we could not reach them. The doors were locked from the outside. He paused, his eyes distant. I tried to break through one of the windows. That is how I got these scars. The glass exploded outward from the heat, and shrapnel cut my face before the flames reached me. They pulled me back, told me there was nothing more we could do. We just had to stand there and watch it burn. And the truth I said, about it being murder, not an accident. The old man shook his head. No one believed us. The official investigation ruled it an electrical fault. Don Ricardo was dead, so there was no one to punish. The families of the victims received some money from the insurance, but not much. And the hotel, what was left of it, sat here rotting for years until it started appearing again. Appearing, the young woman spoke up and her voice trembled slightly. "On Christmas Eve, every year for the past decade or so, the hotel comes back, just for one night. And if anyone goes inside," she did not finish the sentence. She did not have to. "How do you know about it?" I asked her. "Why did you warn me?" She exchanged a glance with the old man before answering. "My mother," she said quietly. "She was one of the 47. She worked in the kitchen. I never knew her. She died the night I was born. My grandmother raised me on stories about what really happened, but no one would listen. They said she was crazy with grief. I looked at her, this young woman who had grown up in the shadow of a tragedy she could not remember, haunted by a mother she had never met. "I am sorry," I said. "I am so sorry." She shook her head. "Do not be sorry. Just do what you promised. Tell the world what happened here. Tell them about my mother. Tell them about all of them." I looked back at the smoking ruins. There was nothing left now. No white walls, no golden windows, no balloons or banners. Just a pile of charred wood and twisted metal overgrown with weeds, clearly abandoned for decades. "Will it come back?" I asked. Next Christmas Eve, the old man followed my gaze. I do not know. Something was different this time. The fire burned hotter, longer, and those lights at the end rising up into the sky, I have never seen anything like that before. He turned back to me and his eyes were filled with something that might have been hope. Maybe it is finally over. Maybe whatever happened in there tonight, it set them free. I thought about Elena, young and whole and smiling, ascending on a column of light. I thought about her last words to me, her final request. "Tell everyone what happened. Tell them about the locked doors. Tell them about us." "I will tell their story," I said. "I will make sure everyone knows the truth." The old man helped me to my feet, and the young woman supported me as we walked slowly down the hill toward the waiting car. Behind us, the sun rose over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and orange colors that had nothing to do with fire and everything to do with new beginnings. I had survived the hotel. I had faced the fire and come out the other side. I had been given a gift, a second chance, and I intended to honor it. But even as I climbed into the car and closed my eyes against the morning light, I knew that some part of me would always be back there in that burning building, running through flames, hearing the screams of the dying, watching Elena smile as she finally found her peace. Some things stay with you forever. Some nights never really end. And some stories demand to be told no matter what it costs to tell them. The drive to Mexico City took 7 hours. I do not remember most of it. The old man and the young woman, whose names I later learned were Miguel and Sofia, took me to a small clinic in San Martin de las Flores where a doctor treated my burns and asked questions I could not answer. How did this happen? Where were you? What started the fire? I told him I did not know, that I had been in an accident, that I could not remember the details. He looked at me with suspicious eyes but said nothing more. Just wrapped my hands in gauze and gave me painkillers and told me I was lucky to be alive. Lucky. That was one word for it. They offered to let me stay to rest and recover before continuing my journey, but I could not bear to spend another night in that town in the shadow of that hill where the hotel had stood and burned. So I thanked them for their kindness, got back in my car and drove. The fog had lifted completely by then, and the mountain roads that had seemed so treacherous the night before were just roads, winding and scenic and utterly ordinary. I passed through small towns decorated for Christmas, saw families walking to church in their finest clothes, heard bells ringing and children laughing, and all the sounds of normal life continuing as if nothing had happened. I arrived at my family's home in the late afternoon. My mother met me at the door, her face a mixture of relief and alarm when she saw my bandaged hands and singed hair. "What happened to you? Where have you been?" I told her there had been an accident. A small fire at a hotel where I had stopped for the night. Nothing serious, just some minor burns. I was fine. I was home. That was all that mattered. She did not believe me. I could see it in her eyes, but she did not press, not then. There would be time for questions later. For now, there was my grandmother waiting in her bedroom wanting to see me one last time. I went to her. She was smaller than I remembered, shrunken by illness and age into a fragile shell of the woman who had raised me. But her eyes were still sharp, still bright. She looked at me for a long moment, taking in the bandages and the burns and the haunted expression I could not quite hide. "You have seen something," she said, "something not of this world." I wanted to deny it, but I could not lie to her. Not now, not at the end. "Yes," I said, "I saw something, and I do not know how to make sense of it." She reached out and took my bandaged hand in her papery fingers. "Tell me." So I told her. Everything. The fog and the hotel and Elena and the fire and the souls ascending into the light. I told her about the locked doors and Don Ricardo and the 32 years of endless burning. I told her about the promise I had made. When I finished, she was silent for a long time. Then she smiled a sad and knowing smile. "You were chosen," she said, "chosen to bear witness, chosen to set them free." She squeezed my hand. "Remember them. Remember all of them." She died 3 days later on the morning of December 28th with all her family around her. Her last words to me were those same 4 words. Remember them. Remember all of them. I have tried to honor that request. In the 5 years since that Christmas Eve, I have done everything I can to tell the story of Hotel Bella Vista and the 47 souls who died there. I have written letters to newspapers. I have contacted historians. I have even returned to San Martin de las Flores, to the hill where the hotel once stood. There is nothing there now, just ruins overgrown with weeds. The locals avoid the place. They remember. The official story has never changed. The fire was ruled an accident. Don Ricardo died a victim, not a murderer. There is no justice for the 47. But I know, and now you know too. I still travel. I still take long drives through unfamiliar places, but I no longer drive at night. And every Christmas Eve I stay inside with the doors locked and the lights on, because sometimes on foggy nights I still see it. A light in the distance, warm and golden, cutting through the mist like a beacon. The outline of a building that should not exist, white walls and glowing windows. And if I look closely, I can see a figure standing at the entrance, young and beautiful, dressed in red, waving at me to come inside. The souls were freed that night. I am certain of that. I saw them rise. I saw Elena smile. But the hotel itself is something else entirely. It is not made of brick and mortar. It is made of memory and pain and hunger. And even without the 47 souls that once fed it, it still exists, still waits, still hungers for more. Elena is at peace now. The figure I see in the fog is not her, not really. It is just an echo, a lure, a mask the hotel wears to draw in the unwary. I never stop. I never slow down. I just keep driving, keep moving, keep running from the memory that will follow me for the rest of my life. This is my story. This is their story. And now it belongs to you. If you are ever driving through the mountains of Mexico on a foggy Christmas Eve and you see a hotel glowing in the distance, beautiful and welcoming and too perfect to be real, remember what I have told you. Remember Elena and the 47. Remember the locked doors and the fire and the screams. And whatever you do, no matter how tired you are, no matter how desperate you are for rest, do not stop. Do not ever stop. Because Hotel Bella Vista is still out there somewhere between the world of the living and the world of the dead, waiting for the next lost traveler to walk through its doors. And some guests never check out. Have you ever seen something you could not explain? A place that felt wrong, a building that should not exist, a light in the fog that called to you? Share your story. Because the dead are always listening and they want to know that they are not alone. And neither are you.